Let's start with a very interesting story from Ars-Torok. Be careful what you scream for. I work as a support manager for a company that sells credit card readers and other services for processing money. Our story starts with a phone call that one of our newest staff members received. The caller does not introduce themselves and instead loudly demands to speak to no less than the CEO of the company and will not give any information aside from his repeated demands and some indirect swearing. Normally, this would earn them a terminated call, but I want to know who has the balls to scream at my staff, so I have him transferred over. Having had some of these calls before, I introduce myself with a very fancy title and ensure the caller that whatever his support needs are, I can handle them without any issue. The CEO is busy at the moment, and I am next in line in the support organization. This is not entirely true, but it works to calm people down and get them to tell me what is actually wrong. The caller is named Steve. Not just any Steve, mind you, but Steve, the owner of Steve's Cafe. And not just one Steve's Cafe, mind you, but the owner of all 7 Steve's Cafes. Steve is offended that he was given to me and not the CEO like he demanded. He is the owner, you see, and needs to talk to my owner, not me. I don't own 7 cafes, and I certainly don't own my company. So I can't understand Steve's needs and can't make the hard choices he needs made. I again assure him that I do have the position and authority to do anything he requires. I am the manager of the support department. I can make any changes he requires. I can set up new accounts or order new devices. Anything. He only needs to tell me his problems, and I will provide solutions. I will support him. The words are immediate and aggressive. Can you cancel my accounts? Well, yes, I can. I inform him that we need a written request to cancel. I also try to inquire why he needs to cancel his accounts. This is standard procedure. If he wants to close his account, then we close his account, but any feedback is useful. Is he leaving because our product was bad? Because our service was bad? Because he found a better deal? But before I can get more than a few words out, he shouts again, "Have call me! He has my number!" And he disconnects. I report this up the chain. No email means no cancellation, but still bosses need to know. First thing next morning, I get invited to an emergency meeting by the CEO, as well as a few other pertinent admins. We go over what happened, and then I am shown an email. Steve managed to find the CEO's internal email address and sent him an email complaining about one of his 7 stores having a horrible time with the product. He is demanding no less than the cancellation of all his accounts and a refund for 3 months of payments he has made for each, as the product is totally unusable. I check the logs. The problem location does indeed have a problem. That started yesterday morning. They are not down, but they are having a bad time. There are no emails or calls informing us, just the screaming cancellation request. I send over the call logs, and we listen to Steve scream and curse at the support agent before he got sent to me. And then I hear 2 words that cue the malicious compliance. Cancel them. The meeting goes quiet. The CEO has spoken. We cancel all 7 accounts and shut down services. They start their day with devices that do not work. The calls come in. Again, the CEO speaks. That account is canceled. Follow procedure. So each manager calls me frantically explaining that nothing is working. The staff apologetically tells them that their account was canceled per their owner's email. We can no longer provide support. Shortly thereafter, the owner calls in, once again screaming to turn them back on. Uncancel them this instant. Get the devices working. He is losing money. I check with the CEO, and after receiving a nod, I say, "Per your request made over the phone yesterday and your email this morning, your accounts have been canceled." Steve just gets madder and says he didn't mean to actually cancel them. He just wanted to let us know what would happen if we didn't fix his issue. He continues to yell. I let the CEO know, and at his request, I transfer Steve to his office phone. I wish there was a satisfying ending to this story, but Steve and our boss talked. Steve was informed that his behavior was unacceptable. Steve admitted that he was expecting expedited service and possibly a discount when he threatened to cancel. He didn't really want to cancel his accounts. He just wanted support to take him seriously and transfer him up the chain so he could get faster, better service. There was no real apology, though both I and the initial support agent were told that Steve would behave himself from now on, and to report if he didn't. Services were resumed, and all 7 locations were opened a bit late. The one location that did have issues yesterday got on the phone with a support agent and were sorted out in a reasonable amount of time. All is right in heaven and earth. But I do hope Steve learned that threatening to cancel your account sometimes leads to you canceling your account, and not to a discount. The malicious compliance was flawlessly executed, strictly following protocol despite the client's threats. It exposed his bluff perfectly, causing maximum disruption without rule breaking. The firm stood its ground, proving that patience and procedure can outsmart aggression effortlessly and professionally. The next story from FTS. Not allowed a day off if you ask with less than 2 weeks' notice unless you are sick? Fine, I'm sick. I worked for a grocery store in Australia for close to a decade. It wasn't terrible, and management treated us with respect for my first few years there. If someone couldn't make a shift, they'd work with us to find a replacement. We were rarely short-staffed, so worst-case scenario things would still run relatively smoothly, even if we were missing a few on a given day. Fast forward a few years, the good manager retires, and an assistant manager from a nearby store is promoted to managing this store. Let's call him Brad, for the sake of this story. Brad approached the position with an ego, treating the store as his to fix, even though things had been running quite smoothly for years before he was in the picture. Part of his vision of fixing the store was stricter adherence to company-wide guidelines in terms of staffing numbers and leave requests. For example, the amount of staff to be rostered on is determined by the number of customers through our doors each day. Staff who was actually experienced at this location knew that we needed more than what the company guidelines specified to be able to function effectively. Within the first month of Brad's tenure at this store, hours are being cut dramatically across the store, causing chaos as nobody was used to the added workload. When confronted about this by other members of management, he immediately dismisses them, quoting company guidelines. During the same period of time, staff began to notice that any request for leave was being instantly denied by Brad. Now, the company guideline is to give at least 2 weeks' notice if you know you'll need a day off. But it goes without saying, sometimes friends or family will make last-minute plans you'd like to attend, or you can't work a shift due to compassionate reasons. Prior to Brad, if you needed some time off, it was as simple as honestly communicating your situation with our manager. Almost always were we able to come up with a solution, and taking a day off was never a big deal. Keep in mind, these guidelines are just that. Guidelines, not strict rules that must be enforced. Store managers are given a rather loose collar from higher management. As long as things are running smoothly and staff are happy, upper management will usually take a rather hands-off approach. They won't micromanage each individual store, ensuring every little corporate guideline is being adhered to, unless there are obvious issues requiring their attention. So now Brad's about a month into his position. We are short-staffed throughout the store. Everyone is stressed, requests for leave are being denied due to the lack of staff that Brad caused in the first place. Brad quotes company policy each and every time he does this. He won't even allow us to organize someone else to cover shifts as it's too much paperwork. It's a Saturday, and I'm due to work my regular shift that same night. I get a call from a friend with a spare ticket to see my favorite artist's sold-out show. I want to go, and I've spoken to a colleague who's willing to cover my shift so I'm not screwing over my team. I call the store, and I speak to Brad. Tell him the situation and that I have someone to cover said shift. Brad predictably gives me the same response that he's been giving everyone else. Sorry, as per Grocery Store X's staffing policy, you must give 2 weeks' notice for any time off. It doesn't matter if someone else is willing to take the shift. Cue malicious compliance. For a manager who's so into following rules, I was surprised to discover that he never took into account Grocery Store X's sick leave policy. Staff are entitled to paid sick leave for a day without the requirement of a doctor's note. If you take 2 days or more off consecutively, then you need a medical certificate. I call back an hour after my initial call. This time I tell Brad that I've come down with the most terrible headache and that there is no way I can work that night. He doesn't even reply to me. I can faintly hear him angrily mumble that he'll have to call in a last-minute replacement before hanging up. It didn't take long for staff to catch on to this loophole. Staff needing time off with less than 2 weeks' notice would no longer bring it to their manager's attention immediately, instead opting to call in sick the day of each time. Obviously, this ensured further chaos in terms of lack of staff, a problem I never experienced in my near decade at the store. Brad quit after about a month and a half of being manager. Replacing him was the old assistant manager that has been at this location for several years at this point. It took a while to reverse the damage Brad had caused, but things got back to normal with someone who actually knew how to run the store at the helm. TL, DR. New boss takes corporate guidelines too literally, causes staffing issues that never existed to begin with, citing said guidelines as justification. Staff en masse uses other corporate guideline as loophole to get around manager, only causing further chaos. Boss quits and things slowly go back to normal. The malicious compliance was flawlessly executed. By following company policy to the letter, staff exposed Brad's inflexible management as the true problem. It forced chaos he couldn't control, ultimately pushing him to quit. The next story from Technos. 3 plus 3 plus 1.5 equals, all you're getting is a half hour, tops. Years ago, one of my employer's clients decided to set up a new office in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I got chosen to spend 3 weeks there getting the new space set up. Also chosen for the job was a guy from another division's Chicago office, Dave. I'd never worked with Dave before, but from the start, I didn't like him much. He was never less than 15 minutes late. He lumbered like a zombie, and I caught him dozing off more than a few times during the first week on site. Still, he was the closest thing I had to a friend in Fort Wayne, so I invited him out to the bar on Friday for all the company-funded booze we could drink. I wish, Zrania, I'm going home and passing out until Monday. The commute has been killing me. Wait, what? It seems Dave's boss had been a dick, and instead of paying for a plane ticket, hotel, and rental car like my boss had, he'd instructed Dave to drive. From Chicago, almost 3 hours away. Me, dude, that is like totally no bueno. 6 hours a day just driving? Dave, yeah, it sucks. Me, still, it'll be killer money. That puts you at what, like 70 hours this week? Jeez. Make sure you put in for your gas and tolls quick, though. The last time I had to get reimbursed for expenses, it took him over a month. I could see what little light Dave's eyes held fade. Dave, they're not paying for any of that. Hearing that, I put in a call my boss, who was as puzzled as I was. If he'd worked for our division, he'd be paid for his drive time and expenses at least. And we were both pretty sure it was corporate edict and not something individual divisions could choose not to obey. Unfortunately, neither I nor my boss had any say in the matter, and neither of us was familiar with Illinois or Indiana labor law, so all we could do was advise Dave to save his receipts for the IRS and complain to HR. On Monday, Dave was late again. After an hour, I was worried and called his cell phone. Dave, I just passed Portage, making pretty good time all things considered. I should be there in about 2 hours. Dave sounded perfectly happy about it, so I figured he'd been required to stop into his office before heading out for some reason. Me, okay, Dave, I'll see you then. When Dave arrived a little after 11, the first thing he did was take a 15-minute break. Long drive, I understood. There was still most of the day ahead of us, and after the break, Dave finally got down to business booting up his computer. He had barely logged in when he stood up and announced he was taking his lunch. Okay. Something was going on, but I hadn't the foggiest idea what. After lunch, Dave finally got around to some work, putting in a good 20 minutes reading email before stopping by to see me. Dave, I'm going to take my second 15 now, and then I'm heading home. Me, what? Dave, grinning like a nut. Don't worry. I spoke to HR over the weekend. I didn't see Dave on Tuesday. His cell phone was going unanswered, and neither my boss nor I had any luck finding out why. We didn't try hard. Not our zoo and not our monkey, after all. Ditto for Wednesday, but whatever. He's probably just sick. And then on Thursday, I see Dave, before work, at the hotel breakfast buffets. Me, Dave, I was getting worried when you were no-show the last 2 days. Dave laughed a little, and after we'd piled our plates with bad scrambled eggs and burned sausage, told me a story. On Monday, the client had noticed him coming in late, doing no work, and leaving early, and called our company to complain. Dave, in turn, was called into a disciplinary meeting with his boss and local HR, who were prepared to terminate him over putting in for 32 hours of unearned overtime the previous week and not working at all the day before. Dave said they were serious, too. One of the guys from building security interrupted the meeting to deliver a box containing the personal effects from his desk. Dave had an ace, though. Well, 3 aces. An email from his boss instructing him to drive to Fort Wayne every day at his own expense as a change in work location, 1. An email from corporate HR telling him that while he wasn't required to work overtime, he was required to report any overtime worked, including driving to or from a client, 2, and a page from his division's employee manual, 3, which covered paid breaks off-site. He then informed them that he was not working any more overtime, and after 3 hours driving in, 1.5 hours of breaks, and 3 hours home, it left him with just a half an hour a day to do actual work. Less, actually, if the traffic was bad. Oh, and that corporate HR was willing to stand behind him on it. He'd just spoken to them before the meeting. Dave, it took those about 3 seconds to realize they were screwed. And well, here I am, back in action. And since everything was booked last minute, I'm in a suite with a jacuzzi and my rental is a damn Cadillac. Dave's malicious compliance was flawless, strategic, well-documented, and backed by corporate policy. He turned an exploitative situation into a paid vacation with a suite and a Cadillac. Every move was legal, precise, and satisfying. A masterclass in corporate checkmate.